All right. Hello and welcome. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for adjusting your schedule today to mine. Just quick, I'm gonna lay out the front end of this, which is that Mark is a believer in flat Earth. I'm not. I believe in a spherical Earth, and we're here to have a discussion today, an interview. I want to learn more about Mark and what makes him tick, and more about his beliefs in a friendly way, and hopefully we do some learning along the way. I want to, before we get, Mark, I'm going to have you listen to this little spiel I'm going to do just sort of in the interest of transparency.
Sure.
And most of this, as I mentioned before, is kind of stuff that we've already talked about in our limited communication. I want to talk about the three things I want to talk about really quickly is why I wanted to do this interview, how Mark and I found each other, and kind of just the parameters we've set up for this interview. So the why I wanted to do it, and I think I hope why is going to be like a big sort of theme in what we talk about today. I think it's going to come up more than once because I think a person's why is a lot more important than like their how or their what. I think why is like what makes people tick. So for me, why I have always been interested in, quote unquote conspiracy theories, although I don't think I would say I subscribe to or believe in any of them. And then I had a specific curiosity about flat Earth just because it seems to have risen in popularity in recent years. It seems to be becoming more prevalent. And for me, and again, this is, my opinion of it, it's the theory that, man, that you have so much, empirical scientific evidence that you have to either refute or ignore or say, I don't believe in it. And that's fine. That's the part that surprises me, that it seems to be a growing belief. And then I just thought I could search it on the internet, but why would I do that? It's a heck of a lot more interesting to get to talk to someone about it who believes in it. And Mark and I, from our limited interaction so far, I get the feeling you're a good guy and a character, and that's great because that'll be a lot of fun here today. And another thing about my why is just like my disdain for the way dissenting opinions are viewed not just in our culture today. I mean, I guess in our culture today, but largely on the internet, on social media. And it's just like, nobody really wants to have a conversation. Nobody wants to learn anything. It's just like point, counterpoint, you're wrong. It's name calling. It's, I don't know. I have a real disdain for that. So that's why I think when people are face to face, you're just a lot more likely to be understanding and really probe and ask questions that matter. So that's my why. Quickly now, how Mark and I found each other, which is really simple, which is that I posted on the conspiracy subreddit on Reddit and said, hey, is there anyone who's a believer in flat Earth who would be interested in doing an interview with me? And Mark, you kind of sent a couple comments in the thread, and you messaged me right away, and you were like, hey man, I'll do it. And that was the genesis of it. And we just sent a few more messages back and forth, and now here we are. That was like less than 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So it's come together really quick. And then just the parameters that we've set out. And again, this is just kind of to have this on the record. Basically, Mark knows that my plan for this interview is to put it out on YouTube, to possibly put it on out on podcast as audio on podcast platforms. I don't quite have a plan for that yet, but YouTube first. And then just again, for transparency, Mark's not being paid or compensated in any way to take part in this. Part of it, though, is that I agree not to edit it in any way that would take any of his statements out of context, and that I won't promote people to view this video in a way that is anyway like mocking or demeaning to Mark or what he believes, because that would be contrary to the whole thing of what I'm doing here. But I wanted you to have that assurance that that's how this material would be handled. So before we get into these first questions, I also want people to know that we don't, this is the first time, like, before I started blabbing about 8 minutes ago was the first time we saw each other face to face or heard each other's voices. We just sent, probably a dozen messages, Reddit and email, and that's it. And here we are. So this is us. You're literally seeing us meeting for the first time. And also, Mark does not know any of the questions that I'm going to ask, although he's just under the understanding that it's like me asking questions, learning about him a little bit and what he believes. So I think that's it. I think we're ready to get into it. So I've blown 5 minutes here. I've talked for 5 minutes. I'll put a little, what do you call it? a timestamp in the thing that it's like, oh, if you want to skip by the host guy blabbing for 5 minutes, click here, and then you can start and actually hear some of the content. Does that also everything sound good to you, Mark?
Yeah, it's all straightforward and sounds fair.
Okay, awesome. So now you don't know any of the questions, but I did tell you there was going to be a little bit of personal questions that I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
And I this is just to build the tapestry for me to understand you a little bit. If you feel uncomfortable with any of these or any question, obviously you reserve the right to not answer any of my questions if you're not comfortable with them. But I hope with some of this personal stuff, even if you have to be vague, I hope you can kind of just give me something, and hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from with these questions.
Sure.
So here we go. Let's first of all, whereabouts do you live, and have you kind of always lived there, or where would you say you were like born and raised?
I was born and raised in Southern California, and I just moved to a neighboring state just over a year ago, about a year and 10 days ago.
Okay,
And
cool. So a bit of an anniversary here.
yeah, so it went by really fast.
Yeah.
Just to get
About how old of a guy are you, Mark?
38.
Okay. And what field do you work in, or have you worked in?
Um, let's call it forestry.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. And then how would you I was gonna say what's the highest level of education you've had? I don't really like that question. It's not really what I mean, but could you describe your
Sure.
education to me a little bit?
You have a bachelor's degree in business administration.
Okay.
Graduated in 2008. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And are you married, or do you have any children?
No, and no.
Okay. And if you were to describe, again, this is like touchy, but I would, whatever you feel comfortable telling, like how would you describe sort of your family life growing up as a kid in Southern California?
Pretty atypical, like the whole two kids, my parents, obviously, two kids and a dog growing up in
Right.
suburbia,
Yeah.
playing sports and going to school and doing all the fun things kids do. Growing up in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, I'm 45, so we're, close, kind of
Yeah.
close, a similar generation. So pretty normal. Like you would describe it as like a pretty normal upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty basic. I mean,
Okay,
I know
cool.
not everybody goes through that. I was very fortunate as a child, and I mean, we all have our hardships and whatnot, but I have it way better than 99% of the people on the earth.
Sure. Okay, cool. So then if can I assume then that as we kind of transition here into like the meat of this, that you would have like attended schools where you were taught and for the most part accepted a theory of a spherical earth orbiting the sun in a vast expanding universe?
Yeah, it's funny that you ask because I remember specifically in kindergarten the teacher talking about it, and I was like, "How does that work?" When she was saying that like people in Australia are standing upside down relative to where we're at,
Right.
and I was 5 years old, and it just never made
Yeah.
sense. So I guess from the beginning, I've always been a conspiracy theorist.
So that's interesting because that was sort of my next question, and I'm sure there's probably still more you could talk about later in life, but that's super interesting that even at that age, I have a daughter who's in kindergarten, so that's really topical for me to think that even at that age you were like, well, that doesn't make sense. So obviously you were thinking about it, or it occurred to you even at that early age. But is there a time or when did you start to really get into these theories, and why? And
Okay. One other thing I'd like to add about being a natural conspiracy theorist, I remember I was probably about 5 or 6, and I didn't believe in Santa Claus, so I stayed up trying to see if he was going to be coming down the chimney, and he
right.
never did, or at least I fell asleep, and maybe he did.
Right.
But anyways, okay. So to get to your question, it was, I would say, fall of 2014, if I recall, and my buddy I was like, "What are you watching, man?" He's like, "Some flat Earth stuff or flat Earth videos," and I was just like looking at him sideways, and I thought, I was like, "Man, you've been been smoking a little too much weed, bro. And then I started looking into it, and then after about 3 days, because I was asking the questions of how does this work, and then I was just like, man, it took like 3 days, and I was just like, oh, my whole life has been a lie, like it just. And that was 2014, so it's been about 8 years, and ever since then, it's been a journey in just understanding logic and what constitutes reality, what is real versus what is relative. And I mean, once you start questioning and you start finding answers, you never go back. But what's interesting is the it gave us choice A or choice B, and both are wrong. Okay, because I feel like the so-called powers that be, Illuminati, whoever you want to, deep state, they got
Okay.
ahead of the curve and they put out a false model, which almost every single flat earther adopts or accepts, which is the azimuthal equidistant map with the North Pole in the center. It's like a pizza pie, and it's round, and it's got the ice
Right.
wall and a
It's like a
dome.
globe. It's like a globe flattened out with the North Pole still on the top, right?
Right, with like a dome, kind of like a snow globe or a terrarium type deal. But that is
Okay.
so easily debunkable, if that's a word, that it
Yeah.
just doesn't make any sense, when you break it down. So maybe they jumped the gun or got ahead of the curve, like,
Right.
no pun intended. But just to put that model out there, which it leads people astray from what is real and what constitutes the nature of our reality.
Okay. I don't know if we should get into this now, because the next thing I was going to ask you is like, okay, lay it on me, like what you believe in. I want to touch on you said something I think that obviously is really important for you there, which is what reality versus perception.
Versus a
For
relativity, like what something that is real versus something that is relative. Or
right. I feel like is that like a pretty important concept to you in sort of what you believe, what's real versus what is relative?
yeah, I mean, that should be what everyone would feel when it comes to truth and what constitutes what is right versus what is wrong. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. But
That's okay. You know what I sort of did too, because there was something that we'll come back to that. So let's get in then. This is the perfect segue into exactly what it is that you believe, because it's not, I think, and I was going to get to this a little bit later as well, but that model that you were talking about, the azimuth, is that how you say it?
yeah, azimuthal equidistant map. Yeah,
Right. Would that be considered the most common sort of flat earth theory? Is that what
it
you were
is
saying?
by and
Okay,
far.
so we'll maybe come back to that a little bit. So tell me a little bit more about what you believe in. I mean, and spare no detail. I'll try not to jump in too often. I'd love to
Okay,
hear it. So
it'll
let
take
me
me a
have it.
second to collect my thoughts, but
Absolutely. Yeah, no worries.
um,
You got a bottle of water there or
I
something?
do, I do.
You got to stay fresh, man.
Okay, hold
I'm
on, let
going
me
to.
take a sip here.
Yeah.
All right. So it's going based off our observations, right? So right now I'm south is like this way towards me. So the sun starts over there and it moves across the sky and goes that way, right? So from
Hmm.
east to west. I mean, that would be an
Right.
accurate statement to say that the sun moves through the sky,
Correct.
right?
Yes, I would say that. Yep.
Okay, so starting off with that, um, came across this YouTube channel of this gentleman. His name is Roman. I can't pronounce his last name. It's I believe he's Russian or something. But
Okay.
in it, he brings up he calls it the Square Earth or Square Earth cosmology. Essentially, it's there's a map called the Mercator map, UTM map, and
Okay.
it essentially is that's the map that is used with GPS coordinates, and it depicts the Earth as a square or like a rectangle broken down into smaller squares all the way down to 1 meter, 1 square meter,
Okay.
which is like what coordinates are. And I mean, not to be like a Bible thumper here or anything, but jumping to the Book of Enoch, in it, you go to chapter 72, and I believe it's verse 2. It talks about the sun moving from it calls it the eastern portal
Okay.
through the western portal. So essentially, what it is, and the way I've been able to cognize this, is that we live in a space time loop, okay, where the sun moves across the sky, and it happens with all physical objects. It basically reaches the end of the earth realm, and it just comes out the other side, like in like Pac-Man or something, like the
Right.
game Pac-Man, right? Or
Yes.
some other
Okay.
video
Yeah.
game.
Yeah.
And I guess it's the same for going north and south. I'm not sure about that, but like following the sun, you could say it starts over there, goes that way, and if you were to line people up and just track it live stream, like that's what we would observe, you know. So
Okay.
essentially, I've broken it down to calling it a space-time loop, which is pretty fascinating if you think about it. And then you have like all these theories that we live in like a simulation, or simulation theory, and that basically this is the the matrix or something.
Right.
But to me why it's important is because if that is the case, then it proves that there's a designer, right? So which some people would call God, or I don't know, the great spirit, or whatever adjective you have to describe the creator of this place. And what I think comes down to is essentially it is unknown. So there's an unknown element that I don't even think we're capable of comprehending or cognizing what it is. Something that is infinite. And since we have a beginning and an end date for our lives, I don't think we can comprehend infinity, because everything has a beginning and an end to us, and then
Right.
so essentially space-time loop, the sun goes across, hits this unseemingly noticeable portal, comes out the other end, happens with airplanes, you can walk across it, type deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that. So I was going to ask you a little bit more about air travel later. Then, then you would not, if I'm understanding this, I think you wouldn't even perceive, if you were standing on the edge of the portal, you wouldn't even perceive it, right? You would step
Right.
into it. You'd be on the other side, and you would just continue on
Yeah,
as if there were no
it's
portal, right?
seamless, but at the same time, given that, it just kind of cements to me that everything is created within our minds, and it could just possibly be emanating from, let's say, our pineal gland or what have you, and it's just like all encompassing within us. Like everything that's outside of us is within ourselves, in our minds. And because it's kind of like, I don't really want to say, but it's kind of like a silly notion to think that we're living on a video game simulation type deal. But man, some people are all about it, because they'll
Right.
mention like the quantum computers, and just the computing power is so great, it's beyond our like wildest imagination. We can't even fathom how strong those computers are, that it can create this so-called reality, kind of like in some science fiction movie where they create a simulation, and then it's like everything is real, but at the same time it's not. It's just what do you call it, virtual reality.
Right. And I know I know that there are lots of people who think that that's not, you're not particularly, or you're saying that's possible, but you don't necessarily subscribe
Yeah,
to
I
that.
mean, I I think the strongest computer is inside of our brains, and everything that it can decode. Because so we have these senses, you can see, smell, taste, touch, and hear. So it's like, what is that before it reaches our senses and it's decoded by our brain and broken down to tell us that this is a door, or that's a tree, or what have you. It's like,
Right.
what is that before we break it down?
Pardon me. Okay, so if I can do, then I'm just kind of double back into the theory here and a little bit of the minutia. Although I kind of get it as far as like a little bit of, so in this model, there's no ice wall, right?
Right. It essentially be a continuous like strip of land
Right,
essentially, and it just like starts over again. Like
right.
or there is no end. There really is no beginning. It's just if you look at Google Maps and zoom all the way out, and it's like a rectangular shaped map of all the continents in their positioning with the bodies of water, and then Antarctica. It's just that, and you can even go on, just keep going right, and you come back out through the left. Keep going left, you come back out through the right. So
Yeah, except Google Maps has actually changed. Now, when you zoom out, it becomes a glow. Or maybe you can turn that setting on or off.
yeah,
I'm not.
I think you need that specific program. But as far as like just going on maps.com or
And I'll
yeah,
try to include some of the interaction that you and I had previous to today was because I asked you, because I did want to have some kind of frame of reference. So you sent me that YouTube channel. I looked at it a little bit. I didn't full, I saw the part about the portal bit, but I didn't really get that that was like the idea. It's just a continuous loop in all directions. But the best way, hopefully I can, without any copyright issues, find something visually that I can put up when you were
sure.
talking about that. But yeah, the best way that I could describe it to a person is if you got the way typically a map of the world would be printed on paper. No, nobody uses a paper map anymore, but if you did, that's what it is in a, without any curvature,
Right.
without even like any implied curvature, right? It's just like a rectangular map of the land masses and the oceans that we know. Okay,
Right.
so so then, you know, in your model of things, like in what manner does outer space exist then? Like it's, you say this is like, you believe this is, I understand the kind of continuous loop, but is there, it's not a dome, is there a ceiling of some kind? Is it infinite? Is it
Right.
infinite upwards as well?
So I'm not exactly sure. I mean, there are videos on that, and the way like he's depicted, which I mean, by the way, I believe he's from Russia, and I haven't seen any post of his for like the last year or so. So I really hope he's all right. And he
Yeah.
had a website; it's down now. Um, but anyways, like it'd be a shame if he isn't around. But it's this, according to what he put down, and I think it could be valid, but at the same time, I don't know. And basically, what it is, like the night sky is, it's like a projection that we're seeing, and the projection is it's on his YouTube channel, but that projection is of here's like another leap of faith to believe in, but it's like the star ball essentially, and it's being projected over like a flat sky. So
Right.
it also doesn't subscribe to the dome, but it's just like a projection, like a screen, and it depicts it's a star ball that like
Yeah, yeah.
is
Like,
projected, and then so it goes into him explaining how okay, the night sky, the stars in the northern hemisphere rotate anti-clockwise, in the southern hemisphere they rotate clockwise, but in between there's actually a star equator where the stars just move straight. So you have stars at the star equator moving straight across, and then northern hemisphere they go anti-clockwise, southern hemisphere they go clockwise.
okay. Okay. I'm just laughing because I'm trying to take that in
Sure.
and
It helps when
kind of
you
make,
watch the video and see a time lapse of that happening, and how there's an actual star equator where the stars actually just go straight across. And
right.
the way from how I've cognized what he was trying to display through his videos is you have this like star ball, okay, and as it rotates and it's being projected on the flat plane, it's the stars on the northern hemisphere will appear to be going
Right.
anti counterclockwise, and the ones in the southern will be going clockwise. And I mean, it makes
would
sense
that
with the visualization of it.
would that be projected from the other side of the plane or from within?
I guess it'd be above us,
Okay.
essentially.
Uh, um, Let me ask some questions too that I think people will probably roast me if I don't
Oh,
ask.
sure.
Which would be then, and from the video you sent me, I saw this a little bit, but maybe you could explain it a little bit. So, what's the explanation then of seasons and how the
Hmm.
sun shines differently on the Earth at different times of the year?
Sure. And that's all like very basic and easy to understand when you look at it as okay, a rectangle map, right? You have your equator, okay, the Tropic of Cancer, and then you have the Tropic of Capricorn in the south. Tropics of Cancer is in the northern hemisphere.
Right.
Now, in the northern hemisphere, our summer solstice, longest day of the year, the sun is going across the Tropic of Cancer. Each day after that gets shorter, and the sun moves about 1 degree south every day, okay, until it reaches the equator, and then the next day after that, it's in the southern hemisphere and going. So then, let's say the sun is all the way at our winter solstice, shortest day of the year. It's at the tropics of Cancer. Okay, so you have your map. Obviously, when it's at the tropics of Cancer in the north, it's super hot, you know, and the sun is like really like right over us practically, and it's direct. Now, when the sun is further south and our winter solstice, it's further away, so we're not getting that direct light. There's more of an angle to it coming. Then you have
Right.
the winter solstice, and then from there, the sun starts moving north about 1 degree every single day when it rises.
Sure. And then when I looked at that, the video that you sent, that's kind of indicating that a little bit, then you see within the seasons that it's completely dark in the south, and in our summer
Right.
solstice, and completely dark way in the north at the summer solstice. And there was one thing that I saw that said, well, if the Earth were completely flat, then wouldn't the sun make it all the way to the edge always? Is the
Hmm.
sun a direct, do you think the sun's like a directional light, or that's just the fall off of
Well,
where it
it's
at
like it's closer. It's not like 93 million miles away. You can see like different angles through the clouds of sun rays coming through the clouds. And as the sun moves, you can see the angles shifting. So it's just a bit of evidence telling us that the sun is close. And so it doesn't have like an infinite range. And in that on that channel, he also like depicts how like the light bends. And really don't even want to get into that because I'm still trying to figure that out.
okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, it's it just it's what is observed is what his digital animations are showing us is basically what we observe. So you take the observations and then you fit the model. You don't like create a model and then have the observations bend to that model, because what we observe is what I would consider real, and I don't think there's any confusion in that or saying that's a wrong statement. And so far as things that are relative, I mean, that would be like, what's your favorite taste in music, or your favorite type of ice cream or whatever. I mean, those could be relative to how you are every day, but when it comes to the physical nature of reality, those are objective. And what we have is people telling us that our perception of what we see in the world is relative, depending on, let's say, where you're standing on the so-called globe or what have you. Like, we'll be standing upright, but people in Australia are standing upside down relative to where we are at, or up and down essentially would become relative in that sense, because you're over here on this side of the globe, down is that way. You're in Australia, down is that way, up would be that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know what I mean? It's just like it. I feel like it's just massive gaslighting, and they created a false dichotomy with two wrong models. So it's like the globe, and then you have the circular flat Earth map, and it's like choose one, but they're both wrong.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's just easy to understand, and it's so easily to debunk the circular map, because that would depict, you know, like the summer solstice, the sun at the Tropic of Cancer would be a smaller circle, versus at the tropics of Capricorn it'd be larger, but the sun still moves basically at the same rate, like
Yeah, it
all the
certainly
time.
doesn't. Yeah, that part of it, yeah, certainly would not work in that model. So I think I'm going to segue again because I think you kind of just got into it talking about, there's two models and they're both wrong. And let's come back a little bit to why. So, and I think I love what you honestly, all of what you said. I get it. I get you saying it's about like what we can see, what we can observe. Like I get I'm starting to understand too. Like that's like the basis of this, what you can observe and creating the model based on that. Like I feel like that's kind of the core at the core of what you're talking about. But let's talk about the why. So so why have two wrong models then been presented to us and for so long, and who gains, just fill me in here, like
Mm-hmm.
what's the why of why we have these two models, and if lots of people know that these models are lies, why has it been perpetuated, for so long?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's just a simple answer. You know, if you can basically like tap into your inner evil psychopathic self, right? If you were to just cause mass confusion and make and basically gaslight people, make them question their perception of reality, it creates confusion and division. So right there, those are two of the big whys. You divide and conquer, right? So that's what these so-called deep state Illuminati powers that be. There's so many different words for them, but that's essentially what they're doing. And like you said in the beginning, there's just like point and counterpoint, and then people are just so divisive on the subject, and they just attack each other. I mean, that's what they want so much. And the they is, you know, they probably don't even have names. They're so like up there. You know, people could say they're all. I don't even want to name them, but it's like X, Y, and B person. But the reason why is to just create confusion. And let's just say, like, look at NASA's yearly budget. It's in the billions, like tens and tens of billions. So, I mean, that's another why. Because if they could extract that much in money from the populace, then why not on their end? You know, like essentially, from what I've come to understand, is the so-called Illuminati and the powers that be. You know, the elite. They they look at us as if we are cattle, like literally disposable um, human vessels, or some other term. You know, they can just use us how they want. It like we're not even human to them. They essentially have a god complex, to where they're trying to be God. They're trying to create our perceptions of what is real and what is life and what constitutes reality, and essentially have us worship them and their systems, like the fiat monetary system, or their scientific doctrine, which I call pseudoscience. I mean, obviously, not all of science is pseudo. There is sacred science and there's profane science. So, sacred science is what is real and what can be calculated with observable recording observable instances that happen. You can see it, it's objective. You can record the parameters of, let's say, force, height, width, length, weight. And getting into this, okay, sorry, I'm just jumping back a little bit here,
No, that's okay.
is about that space time loop thing, okay? So we have three dimensions of which we know, okay, the X, Y, and Z. We live in a 3D universe, but the fourth dimension, according to the guy Roman, and his last name is there. I just don't want to pronounce
Yeah,
it. But
yeah, that's it.
the fourth dimension is what he calls repeating space. So that's what the whole space time loop is. It's the fourth dimension, which is a repetition of that space of moving across. So it's like my finger goes here, and then it comes out here, just like that. So that's the fourth dimension. And to get back to the why, I think it's a pretty simple explanation if you look at it from the eyes of an evil psychopathic person. So, I mean, use that as a tool, obviously, like don't act on it, but some people actually do. And what makes a psychopath is having zero empathy for another human being, right? And so they're just evil. Like I just really don't know
Uh,
how else to say it.
Sure. And so this is an Illuminati or powers that be. These would be people we're talking going above government, right? I mean, this is this, or is
Yeah,
this at a
like
higher level a cooperation of governments, or this is above government?
I think they just use the government. It's a tool, and in reality, it doesn't even exist, right? Like it's just a made up concept. Like if you were to say what is the government, well, it's just comprised of people, or say like cops, they have a so-called authority, but really they're just people and they have guns. And if you go against them, they're going to use it on you and they'll be justified for doing so, which, I mean, I'm not saying like, obviously if somebody is out of line and are being violent towards others, then they give up their natural right to not being harmed themselves. And, people would go about taking care of that problem on their own, which essentially would be like street justice, what
Right.
have you. But I'm
I
definitely
guess
not condoning any type of violence or anything like that. It's just the way
no,
things
no.
are.
And it's just funny because the reason why I ask you about that, about these people being higher than government, because I always feel like in conspiracy theories that governments get too much credit. I don't because I don't think they're that bright.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're that bright. I don't think they're that efficient, and I don't think they're would be coordinated enough without it leaking, without things. I that's why I always kind of laugh when I feel like governments get too much credit. I understand
Mm-hmm.
what they can affect, what governments can affect, but sometimes to me the sort of government boogeyman, I feel like you're giving these governments too much credit.
Well, I mean, they did shut the world down for 2 years and made everybody wear masks, and that's still going on. So they do have quite a bit of influence through coercion and violence, essentially. I mean, you had people running on the beach and they're being chased down by cops, but the cop is also a human and he's just embodying the ideal of the government to basically suppress people from doing what is natural based on some illogical, irrational fear that they're harming somebody by not wearing a mask or running on the beach in public or what have you. So, I mean, there is that. They do have a so-called power and we don't fight them because we value our lives.
Yeah, certainly they wield power. I always kind of balk at if they get too much credit. Maybe they're I just say I could believe more them carrying out orders or doing something to please someone else rather than being that, but maybe not. I don't know. That's just a thought that occurred to me, Mark. Again, I'm not
Sure.
uh yeah. Let me double back to, you brought up NASA and talking about their budget. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit too. So and you also talked about what's observable, and obviously I've never been in a spacecraft or on an Apollo mission or whatever to be able to see photos taken back of the Earth. I believe those. And but is the space program like just completely false? Have we never been to space?
Yeah,
No
it's
moon landings. No.
right. I mean, just look at the moon landing, and today it's not like rocket science to say that it's just shot like somewhere on Earth, with some type of graphic to make the background black and the dirt gray. or whatever. It's like NASA and their whole, like the astronauts, they're in outer space, so called, in their International Space Station. Like they're suspended by wires. Like you can see it. There's all these videos. They used to be on YouTube, but they're all gone now. But if you go on, I believe they'll still be on Rumble. Like you can just see it, and like just the look on their faces. There's something called Duper's delight, where they just get off on the fact that they're like blatantly just tricking people. And there's so many inconsistencies too. Like this one crazy looking astronaut, right? She's got her necklace. It's like floating or whatever. It's like, and like like zero gravity. She's all floating and stuff. And her hair is like static. Like they just sprayed like a whole bottle of hairspray on it, and it's just like not moving an inch. And say if they do have those videos of they'll go in an airplane, go all the way up, and then like nosedive essentially. So now they're in like zero gravity, and but you'll never see that shot for more than a minute or so because they have to go back up and then do it again, go back up and do it again.
Right.
So that's that, and yeah, it's just like look at those videos of astronauts being suspended by wires and just all the inconsistencies in their videos, and then when they're outside on their spacewalks, it's like it's just CGI and they're in like a pool, like in water, so they have that type of movement. And I mean, you go up in an airplane, I've flown, like it's just a horizon line, it's like it. I don't even think like people from long ago could even like cognize that we're on anything else other than like a plane, so take that word plane, plane,
Right.
right? That's what we live on, is a plane. All
Mm-hmm.
they did was add a T to it and then called it a planet, which the planets are like the so-called wandering stars up there. They move across the sky. All the other stars are fixed. And just to get a little bit deeper into the esoteric side of things, the whole Big Bang Theory apparently was created by the Jesuits. And there's a specific guy, I think his last name is like Lemaitre or something like that. I didn't look it up. I didn't do too much research before this. But anyways, so the Jesuits came up with the whole Big Bang Theory. A T is also could be symbolized as a cross. Okay, so you have your plane, and they took their cross, their T, staked it, and claimed the plane, and essentially changed the name to a planet.
Right.
So it's just I came up with that on my own. It's just like
Yeah.
it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's all interesting to me, Mark, and I appreciate the thought you've put into it. And I didn't, like I didn't do additional research. I came in to talking to you with my seventh grade, science or whenever they taught us this knowledge, and I just looked, at a couple of things and a couple of the things that we had exchanged, and that's what I came into this with, because that's all. That was the I didn't want to come in and say, well, what about this and what about that, because I know we could be here for ages doing that, Mark, and neither one of us would change our mind,
Right.
and we'd still think the other one was wrong, and then we'd go our separate ways. So I appreciate that you're just speaking from the heart of the things that you've learned and that you believe in as well. So if I can stay in, so the sun and the moon and the planets are all moving within these portals, and the stars are
Essentially.
fixed, essentially. And so, I mean, so even, we've seen, I guess the NASA thing is, does it surprise you the lengths to which they'll go? Because to me, I mean, you can go put on the NASA channel, you can go see a live stream of the ISS, the lengths to which they'll go. Because I sort of feel like if it were a big lie, that they wouldn't need even to quite go to these lengths because the
Mm-hmm.
more you put out there, I think also the more content and the more these photos and videos and whatever else you put out there, the more it lends itself to being dissected, or people looking for things that they can take apart and say, oh, I saw that, I'm not buying that, or whatever. Does it
Right.
surprise you the lengths that they go to keep that alive?
No, not at all. And I think they're just so far down that path, they'll never like recant any of it. They're gonna hold that to the grave. Like, and because if they did, and people were to realize in mass like what it is that they're doing to us, everyone would stop like doing what they're doing. Everyone would stop working and just go live their lives on a farm somewhere versus living in this like rat race, like hamster wheel of work and taxes. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, the lengths of what they would do does not surprise me at all. And with technology advancing and CGI, and they could essentially do any of it, make it seem as if what they're doing is actually real and legitimate. So it's, let me see here. Let me take a look at my notes real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, about
I just,
magic. Like, how does magic manifest? Like technology could be looked at as magic essentially without an explanation of like how are we connected right now and being able to communicate hundreds or thousands of miles apart real time. It's
yeah.
obviously we know it's technology, but somebody without a knowledge of that could just chalk it up to magic.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's just like Bluetooth technology. It's just magic, right? So where I'm going with that is I look at like the whole world, or most of it, not all but most, we're, and I've been there, we're like under a spell, like a magic spell. Okay, and it's just done by words. It's not like any hocus pocus Harry Potter type stuff, but on a realistic sense, it's done through words and the creation of our perception of reality. And so I feel like there's many magic spells, like when we're on contacted each other on the conspiracy website. I remember when I graduated college in 2008, started doing some research and looking into the whole 9/11 deal, and then I realized like that's not what happened. Is what the story of the media and government is telling us is completely false. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, wow, the government are the evil ones. They're the bad guys. And I just remember that feeling. I was like, whoa. So it all kind of started from there. And then that's 2008. And then
2008, you said?
for me,
For
yeah,
you, yeah.
it was specifically a David Icke video, which I don't subscribe to that guy. I believe he's controlled opposition, just like many of the other so-called people in the truth movement, or the so-called truth movement. They're like, I don't even want to name them, but they're they're just controlled oppositions to lead us into a certain direction, give us 99% of truth. So everything that they're saying is right. But then there's that 1% that makes all of it essentially wrong. So it's like all or nothing when it comes to truth. Like, and what is objective, you have to take all of it. And I think what that leads to is, for me personally, I call him God, and not so much to genderize God and call God a him,
Yeah.
right? But the way I look at it is you have two sides of the coin. You have the physical world in which we live, okay, and then you have the ethereal world. So you have the physical side, then the metaphysical. We call Earth Mother Earth, right? That's like a pretty known
Yep.
thing that people say, Mother Earth. But then there's
Sure.
Father Time, Mother Earth and Father Time. It's the dichotomy that creates reality: the physical world, the metaphysical world, the masculine notion of there being a God, like the Father, and then a feminine notion of there being a nurturing mother, the
Nurturing,
Earth.
yeah.
Shelter and food and all that good stuff that we
Right.
enjoy.
Yeah. I I think those are really interesting concepts, and they're big, and I coming back to minutia, because that's really, I'm like, I dig what you're saying about big picture stuff. Like I think it's really cool. One last thing on space. So
Sure,
no,
sure.
no satellite, we have our cell phones, but there wouldn't be satellites, man-made satellites. Would that be possible or not?
I think they're ground based. satellites, and they just bounce signals off of what is called a firmament, or the ionosphere. But I don't believe it's a sphere, so the ionis. But ground-based satellites,
Right.
that or maybe unmanned aerial drones that just like are flying up
That
there,
could hover.
that you can send signals to and fro,
Right.
and like you can see them at night. Like you'll just see like a dot in the sky moving across the sky, and everyone will say, "Oh, that's a satellite." And I never bring this stuff up with like people. I just like I have in the past, and it's just so much easier to just not and to just know for myself and be okay in that knowing. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like they'll say, "Oh, that's a satellite moving across the sky." And it's like, really, like, what do you know it to be? It's just a dot moving across the sky. And sure, you want to call it a satellite, sure, but
Right.
it's like we don't really know what that is. I mean, I could get into the fact that okay, they say the satellites are what like 300 miles away from us above the surface of the Earth, and they're about what the size of a truck or a car or something like that. Like, do you really think you could see something the size of a car from 300 miles away?
I have no idea. If it
Yeah,
depends how big of a light they strap to it. I mean that. Yeah. I mean that's a guess. I mean that would be a guess. Um, so yeah, I understand that falls back into the whole concept of what's observable and what and if to you feels like common sense. I get
right.
that. Let me just so I guess another thing is you mentioned much closer to the beginning, Book of Enoch.
Hmm.
So that's in maybe you could tell me a little bit about that. That's a biblical text, but it's not part of like um,
The Bible.
the more commonly referred what's commonly referred to as the Bible.
Right. I really don't know too much about it. I've read bits of it here and there, but I just know chapter 72. Read that, and it gets into detail about the lengths of the day and the lengths of the night. It's pretty redundant, but
Okay.
the first three chapters, or I mean, verses, the first three verses of chapter 72, especially verse 2 of chapter 72, it just says it right there. The sun moving from the eastern portal to the western portal. And yeah, so it's,
Right.
like I pretty much stopped looking into a lot of this stuff because I feel like once I've come to the understanding of what reality is, I don't really need to look into it anymore. I've just been focusing a lot more on like myself, like healthy things, going to the gym, doing yoga class, started getting
Right.
into dance class and preparing for the work season coming up here in the summer. Um, yeah, I'm in wildland firefighting, so that's why I said
Okay.
forestry, and that's
Right.
just really what I'm all about, like just
Yeah, that's
working
awesome,
on
man.
myself. So
So that's yeah, and that's kind of another thing I was just kind of asking you about. So then, what's your, do you, what do you feel like? What do you see sort of for the rest of your life going forward? Do you feel like you want to try to fight against this system to create something new, or just kind of be
nah,
the best person that you can be and live and enjoy your life, or
the
and
latter.
continue to try and enlighten people,
Yeah.
or just be
Just be, if I can enlighten someone through a conversation, sure, but I'm not going to go out and seek that. I'm definitely not going to fight against the system because that's just a losing battle. The system essentially wins. There's no defeating it. So it's just focus on my life and myself, and not cause harm to anyone, live under natural law and the natural order of things, which essentially I put God at the top, and then man, and then under man would be animals and nature. So we have domain over nature and the animals. And I mean, not to say like we definitely shouldn't be abusing them and what have you. I mean, that's wrong, obviously, but I mean, we do use them for food and for work. We harvest trees to have furniture and houses and shelter and all that stuff because in reality, like nature is indifferent to if we destroy it or not. Like nature doesn't have feelings.
right.
I mean, I'm not saying like we should destroy it. Like we should do what is right for the earth and the environment and all that. But I mean, you have like their their whole like green energy and stuff, which uses more fuel and causes more destruction than if you were to actually just use natural gas and oil, you know. But that's just a whole nother topic. We don't
Yeah,
need to
yeah.
get
And well, I
into.
mean, that's interesting that, do you think, like, would you agree though that those resources like fossil fuels and whatnot are finite, or do we not really know that?
Mhm. I don't think they're finite. I think they're renewable in under the earth. From what I've seen, there was another. He was an oil tycoon. A video of him that I saw on YouTube, and he was talking about how they just essentially created the notion of a fossil fuel to make it sound as if it's something that is scarce, so that way they can just jack the price up. But I mean, if you think of like all of the cars and vehicles and ships and trucks and machinery, everything that is using diesel or gasoline to power, it's like so astronomically like unfathomable how much in mass that constitutes. It's the second most abundant liquid on Earth aside from water. You know, it doesn't seem like we're going to run out of it anytime soon. And then you have your so-called renewables, which, you know, like they have a shelf life. They're not going to last forever. So,
Do you have concern? We won't go too far down this path, but do you have concern? Like, do you feel like that man-made climate change is a thing, is a crisis, and we're just attacking it the wrong way, or do you think it's not a problem?
excuse me one second.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. So we've come to know, I guess, that there's a ice age about 50 or so thousand years ago is
Right. Yes.
common knowledge, right? So if the Earth was covered in ice or half of it or whatever, at one point the ice has been receding to where we're at now.
Right.
Was that due to man-made caused global warming, where the cavemen burning down the forest and creating all? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
just a logical sense that the Earth goes through cycles of cooling and warming. We're just in that warming period, and then people are just making money off it, man. Like
Well,
they're just making
there's no
billions of
doubt about
dollars.
that.
They want to sell carbon tax credits. That's all it comes down to is money, because essentially, like the number one god and the number one religion on earth is money. Like money is
Right.
above everything in today's society. It just dominates the culture in all societies everywhere. It makes everything like happen, and so people will do whatever it takes for it. And that's all I think it is. They're just what's the word, like grifters or shills. You know, you go on any social media website, oh, the earth is dying. You know, they'll show a polar bear like starving, and we need to save the polar bear's ice caps because they're all melting, and because we're using too much fuel, this and that. When I mean, sure, I'm sure people believe in that, because I used to believe in that too. But then if you like read other material countering that, the climate change and all that, read the counter side to that. It's just the sun cycles, and it's just a natural hapstance, you know. Ice age, ice melting indicates the Earth is warming, but man-made carbon increase wasn't happening. It was just a
Right.
natural progression. So,
Yeah.
you know, I just say for those people, look at the other side of the argument, make and draw your conclusions from there. Don't be stuck to any one side.
Okay. I want to ask you one more quick thing, and then I'll kind of give you a chance if you want to kind of have a parting statement. But I did want to ask you one thing. Obviously, we see you here. Your identity is partially concealed, which we had discussed that you expressed an interest in doing, and I didn't have a problem with that. And I'll tell you also, this is funny. You said I believe your camera has cleared up. You were
It has,
when
yeah,
you came on, you said you had removed something covering your camera, and it was really blurry, and it's actually got, like, I'm just thinking about it now. I see you a
yeah.
lot better now than I did when we first started. Just tell me a little bit about, what you, the reasoning. what kind of negative repercussions you feel like you could have put upon you for expressing your views, and where that would come from. Are you concerned about in negative repercussions in your relationships, is something at work, or more just like that you could be negatively affected by some sanctions, if you will, against you personally?
I'd say, I don't know, honestly, like, I can't really say like my job would fire me if they knew I was a flat earther. Maybe all the other guys in the crew would be laughing at me all day or whatnot. Or just on my daily interactions going to the gym, and I bet you those people probably wouldn't even see this, or but I mean, I have heard of like flat earthers that have gone against the flat, round, circular map, like having death threats come their way.
Really?
But yeah, this guy, Darren Nesbitt, Daz Nez is his channel, and he's come across that channel that I was talking about. The channel's name is Roman, and it's really hard to find. But anyways, like, he's come across that material, and not many people have. I'd say less than 10,000 people like view it this way. Because I've gone on the Globe Skeptic subreddit, and they're like adamant it's the azimuthal equidistant map. But that, to me, that's just controlled opposition. So,
Right.
but yeah, as far as like any repercussions, I'm not really too worried about it. I'm not even that disguised. I'm a pretty recognizable person when I go out in town. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the Illuminati is going to come after me and try to kill me or anything. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. Maybe I'm just
And
paranoid. Who knows?
And if I can just actually, you just reminded me one other thing about, so is the map that you believe in, do you think is there more of a, are the people who are following that, is there more of a religious or spiritual aspect to it, and the other one more of a, like, is it more secular, or is religion play heavily into this on all fronts?
Well, it's a complicated question, but I don't think it is based on religion, although he does cite certain verses from the Bible and also the Book of Enoch, which basically corroborate with what is observed and shown in reality, but along with the digital model that he made up, you know. So, and he'll like have the Bible verse on the side, and then, but I mean, as far as so there's a book. Can I drop the name of a book here?
Sure. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay, there's a book. It's called Science and the Myth of Progress. So I'll suggest for people to look that up. It's a compilation of different authors, and one of the chapters is called like Sacred and Profane Science. Another one, this guy named Titus Buckhart. He has a book called Mirror of the Intellect, and specifically chapter 3 of Science and the Myth of Progress is his chapter. He has a chapter in there, and he talks about how before the heliocentric model, like geocentrism was essentially in line with a spiritual connection to a creator or to God. And I don't want to get into it. It's like really, it's not, it's complicated at first when you get into it, but then it's like really simple. And when you can understand the connection there, and how the heliocentric model, essentially what it did was turn us all into relativistic beings in the sense of a physical world, but then that translates over to a metaphysical world where moral relativism is what is reigning. So it's like people doing what they feel is right at the time, even though it's not necessarily right in nature or in the order of things. So it's like you have people that think there is no such thing as good and bad, but it's like, well, okay, there's no such thing as good and bad. If you were to get punched in the face, I mean, that would be pretty bad, right? Or if somebody, helped you out when you're in the time of need, I would consider that something good. So, I mean, be relative all about it as you want, but objectivity and truth reigns always.
That seems like kind of putting a button on it. I don't know if there anything else you wanted to, any other topics, anything else you wanted to get into. I've really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed listening to you.
Sure.
Or
Just
do you
real
have?
quick.
Is there any? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, about okay, so truth is objective. I mean, I think anyone with a rational mindset would say that is true, is that truth is what it is. Truth is. Okay, and so if people were to say, well, truth is subjective, well, that means that it can be objective, right? So if the statement is truth is subjective as a truthful statement, right? It's like saying, well, it is subjective, but it also might be objective. So therefore, it's objective. That's just how I look at it. But okay, one thing I wanted to read a quote here, or
Sure. Yeah.
from an excerpt from the book "Science and the Myth of Progress." This is on page 46, and this is Titus Burkhardt, Burkhardt,
Okay.
and it is this: for modern man, any science becomes suspect if it leaves the plane of physically verifiable facts, and it loses its plausibility if it detaches itself from the type of reasoning that it is completely reliant on. So that's like an example of some of the stuff I read. It's called esoteric knowledge. I mean, people know about that, but it's, essentially the genre would be the perennial tradition or perennial philosophy. And there's a whole slew of authors. You can just type in their book name and PDF. I mean, just going on looking for that book, Science and the Myth of Progress, you'll see a list of all the authors. Type their name, PDF, it just comes up free because nobody reads this stuff, and and it's out there, but they're not trying to hide it. Nobody cares. There's nothing like exciting or sexy about it. It's hard to digest at first. I mean, I would say have a dictionary online. You come across a word, type it in, and you'll like that in itself is better than going to college, in my opinion. Just reading books from the perennial tradition and authors such as Rene Guénon and Frithjof Schuon, and then Martin Lings and James Cutsinger. There's a whole slew of them. Ananda Kumar Swami, Ravi Zacharias. He passed away not too long ago, maybe a year or two ago. But it all has to deal with truth. The metaphysical side of things is real. Like science will discount there being an actual ether or like a sixth sense. Like none of that, which is measurable, doesn't exist in pseudoscience or scientific doctrine. But yeah, I feel like we could go on for hours, but yeah, maybe you could do it again some other time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we'll do a follow-up. But hey, man, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you reaching out and coming on here to talk to me on my as of yet unnamed podcast project. But hopefully I'll get this put together, cleaned up a little bit, get the audio good, and get it out on YouTube. And hopefully some people watch it, and hopefully it opens some people's minds, maybe start some conversations, and just hopefully I would hope that people come away from it realizing like, oh yeah, we can treat people like human beings even if we don't agree. Like we can have a conversation. It doesn't hurt anyone. It should be helpful. I really enjoyed talking to you, Mark. I appreciate the time, and I think you said some really interesting things, and I plan to certainly watch it back too because I think I was trying to keep up on getting my questions to you and stuff like that. But I think there's lots to listen to you from you again a second time and digest and think about. I think it's really cool, and I appreciate your viewpoint and you being able to express it as well as you did. It was lots of fun.
Okay, great. Yeah. Likewise, Chris. It was good. Just one last thing.
Yeah.
Out there. Australia is real. Okay. Like the people will say like flat earthers don't believe Australia exists. I'm pretty sure that was just some troll or shill to try and discredit us and make us like attack our mental state or whatever. But, like I'm like a normal guy. I go to the gym, I work, I'm part of I don't go around telling everyone the earth is flat, it's like what have you. But
You're not
yeah,
handing out. You're not handing out pamphlets.
no, I mean, and some people do, and it's of that wrong model I was telling you about. So it just creates a
Right.
whole false dichotomy. It creates division and confusion. And like you were saying, it's like people just should come together, have conversations, start asking questions of, everyone has asked themselves, what is the point of all of this? Where do we come from?
Yeah.
And yeah, we could leave it
Awesome.
with that.
I hope you feel like you were heard today. Like I hope that's my other hope too, is that you feel like your voice was heard, and by me certainly, and hopefully it'll be heard by more. So
Absolutely. Hope it gets 1 million views.
yeah, that'd be great. And then and sometime we'll see. We're not that far apart from each other. Maybe sometime in the future we go out for a beer somewhere and we
Sure.
can talk more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, man.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you, Chris.